Well, good morning. We're opening this morning's first meeting of the day will be the Pinellas Core Management Services meeting. And I'd like to begin with the pledge and ask Mr. Butler to lead us in the pledge. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic which stands one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. We have a presentation this morning that even I'm looking forward to. It's the history of PCMS, the Pinellas Core Management Services. And even though I've been on the board for a while, I appreciate the historical perspective of this organization. So Deb Pruitt, come on to the podium.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and good morning, board members. Just to kind of take you down the timeline of the creation of what you now know as Pinellas Core Management Services. It was actually created in 1999. It was a non-for-profit corporation known as the Neighborhood Family Centers Coalition. It was originally contemplated for the neighborhood family centers to pool resources for more efficiency. They operated under the NFCC and hired an executive director. In 2008, the name change came about of Pinellas Core Management Services that we now operate under today. And the operational change continued to operate outside of the Juvenile Welfare Board with a new executive director. And they, at that point, there was minimal use of the PCMS entity other than wrapping up some contracts that they'd had previous in that previous construct. The PCMS is subject to the Sunshine Law, public meetings, public records by virtue of being operated by the Juvenile Welfare Board and being defined by JWB's auditor as a component unit of the Juvenile Welfare Board. PCMS's stated mission is to receive and administer federal, state, local grants and other funds and administer programs to pass through the funding to other 501c3 organizations in the core service areas of parent support and skill training, family literacy services, economic development activities, child development activities, outreach, and other activities to benefit low-income families and individuals in Pinellas County. The board determined that it was beneficial for the Juvenile Welfare Board and the community to maintain the 501c3 entity for the following reasons. To secure certain grant funding that required submission by a nonprofit versus a governmental entity, and that actually proved helpful in 2008 and the following years in what's been referred to as the Great Recession. It allowed the submission of the Internal Revenue Service for the Volunteer Income Tax Assistance Program and the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services Teen Pregnancy Prevention Grant. The utilization in the past 5 years allowed for a child care purchasing state match pool for the Early Learning Coalition of Pinellas County, and that was under the Child Care's Executive Partnership. Currently, the utilization is to receive funding from the Foundation for Healthy St. Pete related to the Children's Mental Health Initiative. Unless there would be a conflict, such as a board member having employment with the entity that receives funds from PCMS, JWB board members serve as the PCMS board members as follows. The officers include a chair, a secretary, and a treasurer, and they serve for a 2-year term. They are only required, PCMS entity is only required to have an annual meeting, and PCMS is treated as a component unit of JWB's audit and is audited along with the Juvenile Welfare Board.
position as public defender, taking inquire an official action to approve to serve on the PCMS board. So at this moment, I'll call for a motion to approve. I see Mr.
So moved.
McCurrick and a second. I
Second.
see Mr. Ongst approve that. All in favor? Motion carries. Welcome and double duty for you two. Action item B is to approve the minutes from the March 12th, 2020 PCMS meeting. So a motion, please. Mr. McCurrick and a second, Mr. Ongst. All in favor of approving those minutes? Aye, none opposed. That motion carries. And so now we will go to action item C, review PCMS 2019 2020 990 tax form. And Laura Brock, that's for you to take that.
Yes, thank you. Good morning. So as you just heard, PCMS is a separate legal entity, a 501c3, and as a result, it is required to file its own tax return. We file a 990 tax return. We have the same fiscal year as JWB, which is a 930 year end. However, in the tax return world, the tax return is always the beginning of the fiscal year. So we're filing the 2019. So before you, you have a copy of the draft of the 990 included in the policies of the 990. There's one of the questions indicates, do we provide this copy for review to all board members before it's filed? So we don't need any action to actually approve this today, but we wanted to make sure that for the record that that it had been provided to all the board members. Certainly, if you have any questions or items of corrections, please let us know before we'll be filing the return. Any questions on that?
So Laura, I need to clarify at this point, do we not need board approval to accept the 990?
I don't believe so. Colleen, you want to weigh in?
Yeah, we don't need it. The question on the 990 is just whether you've reviewed it. And I believe that our minutes will reflect that the board has reviewed it and no board members had any questions or issues. And moreover, last meeting, you guys approved the audit, which contained the PCMS audit as well. So I think we're in good standing without a formal approval.
Thank you. So before we move on from this item, are there any questions regarding the 990? Seeing no lights nor hands, we'll move on then to the information items, which again is the follow-up of the audit, is the financial statements that were included in our audit. But Laura, you're going to address this?
Correct. I
Thank you.
just wanted to just provide a little bit of a highlight. So when we had the audited financial statements, the auditor's audit, what's called the general fund, and included in our financial statement audit was the special revenue fund. And the special revenue fund is PCMS. So that's disclosed in the footnotes. It's a separate column in the financials. And so the 990 reflects that activity for the last year. So the balance sheet reflects that PCMS has $110,000 in cash and investments. Net assets are the same amount. And we just had a loss this past year of $3,354. Primarily the revenues this year were only $7,500, which came from the Foundation for Healthy St. Pete. And that, as you heard earlier, was to support the Children's Mental Health Initiative. Administrative expenses were $11,000. The majority of that is tax preparation fee, $2,500, general liability insurance, $2,200. And then of course the expenses that were incurred relative to the mental health initiative, which was $5,700. So we have just a snapshot of that information if you had any questions on that, but we just wanted to make sure we were transparent in providing you with all the information relative to this separate legal entity. Madam Chair.
Once again, any questions or comments regarding the overall financial statements, PCMS? No? Okay, then I think we call for adjournment.
Do we need to approve these or no?
No.
Okay.
We have a motion to adjourn. Thank you. I see Judge Moore and Mr. McCurrick. So let's move on then to the opening of our Juvenile Welfare Board meeting. And we'll move right into calling for a motion to approve the consent item, which today includes the minutes from March 11th, 2021. Okay, Mr. Ongst and Judge Moore, all in favor? None opposed. That motion carries. So we are on to item 3A for those following along online, which is to approve budget amendment for the literacy programming expansion. Judith, I think you're taking the podium, and or who will be joining you is Patrick Pigeon.
Hi, good morning to everyone. I realized that when I put my glasses on that everything fogs up and I can't read, so I put my presentation today in like 18 font. So I should be good to go. All right, the goal of this memo today is for expansion of our literacy program. I do want to introduce some esteemed colleagues that we have with us today. We have Bridget Heller, and she is co-founder and CEO of the Shirley Proctor Puller Foundation. We have Tim Staley. He is the COO for the Y of Greater St. Pete. And last but never least, we have Freddie Williams, the CEO of the Boys and Girls Club of the Suncoast. And you will hear from them today during this presentation. All right, you'll see right at the top of the memo, the dollars that we're requesting for expansion. The first for this year is $840,609. And for next year, it would be an expansion of $2,326,272. So those are the two numbers that we'll keep our eye on today. Before we actually go in and review the expansions in detail, I want to just do a little bit of refresher about the history of this procurement and some unique challenges that we faced. The programs were procured in fiscal year 19, all right, and their target for startup was January of 2020. Y Reads got started right in October, November. The others were completely up and operational by January of 2020. So then we hit March, all right, so on March 13th, the school system made the decision to shut down temporarily and pivot to a virtual platform. And then on March 26th, the Safer at Home order was issued in Pinellas County. So both of these circumstances dramatically impacted the start of the programs. We were at a time where there was limited PPE, and also staff were afraid to come to work. So we saw resignations during this time. All programs did begin full operation, some earlier, by June of 2021. In some instances, due to CDC guidelines, they could serve only fewer children. In some instances, children that had signed up did not return, in part due to the virus. So a great strength that came out of this time was really the partnership and collaboration that we saw from these three providers that are here today. They quickly pivoted to meet the needs of their parents and the children and work together to make sure that all children were served. So another challenge, and we're going to speak a little bit to the data now. Dr. Barbara Morrison Rodriguez is going to have some input into the data, and then we're going to hear a little bit from Patrick. But the data was challenging. We had hoped to use the Florida Standard Assessment data to determine if the program impacted positively in the children's literacy skills. However, these tests were not delivered in the school system for this year. So this background, all that I've spoken about, is important as we look at the year one data. Patrick is prepared to review the year one data in greater detail. That was your request at the past board meeting. We also heard from Dr. Grego, who urged us to take a look at the MAP data. And this is testing that the school delivers 3 times per year that looks at literacy and math. Because the MAP data is new to us, we have to work this year very collaboratively with the school system to properly interpret the data. So just a little bit of the order today. We're going to hear a little bit from Dr. Barbara Morrison Rodriguez and Beth around some complexities of the data. Patrick will then review more detail the data that was presented last month. Then I am going to review each of the expansion requests in detail, giving the providers the opportunity to speak for a few minutes on the impact of their expansion. So with that, I am now going to turn sort of the data complexities and discussion over to Barbara.
Thank you, Judith. Can you all hear me? I just wanted to take a few minutes to caution us and ground us as we review data, not just for these programs, but for all JWB programs, with a certain caveats that I want to share with you. First of all, there is no perfect measure. It doesn't exist. All measures have benefits and problems. When they they try to make sure that they are as robust as possible. But if you know anything about the world of statistics, you know it's based on probabilities and not certainties. So I think we have to be careful in putting all of our trust in metrics, and particularly in a single metric. There's a concept in research called triangulation, and that's something that we should search for. And it's multiple evidence of the same underlying issue. 3 test scores are better than 2. 2 test scores are better than 1. Particularly for program people on the ground, the more information they have from different sources indicating how their participants are doing, they are in a stronger position to make decisions about both things that are moving forward and deficits. So I wanted to say that with the introduction of the MAP scores, they are important. We will work with the school system to make sure we have good MAP data, but they do not negate the results from things like iReady and other programs that were used, which are also validated instruments with all of the publications about where they are strong and where they may have deficits. So in that sense, multiple measures are important. And just to give you a real life analogy of that, when you go into the doctor's office and he gives you a single test and says something doesn't look right, the very first thing he says is what? Let's do a few more. Let's test this with a few more diagnostics so I have more information to make a sound decision. So I am just saying, as we look at this data set or any other, please keep that in mind, that we're always working with probabilities. The more measures we have, the more certainty we can try to strive for, but there is no perfect measurement. They all have degrees of measurement error. They all have strengths and weaknesses. They all have some populations for which they are more appropriate than others. And I just wanted to put that out as a caution for us.
So, and I can understand the need to look at multiple areas and phases. How do you weight those, though? Do you weight them equally? Each one of those testings?
Not necessarily. What you do is you read about how they were constructed. Most validated instruments have a study that's called a psychometric study, which tells you what it was designed to measure, how it was developed, who it was field tested on, what those testing results were. It may have, for example, worked more robustly for one population than another, and the psychometric studies will tell you that. And they publish statistics which you can incorporate, which is a measures of what are called reliability and validity. Validity gives you a coefficient, and without getting into the details of it, the higher that coefficient is to 1, the stronger the measure is. Validity is, are you measuring what you say you're measuring? So if we're interested in literacy, how strong a test is it to actually measure literacy? That's validity. And there is a coefficient that tells you, based on the testing that they did, how strong a coefficient that was. Reliability has to do with the consistency of the measure. So if you gave it repeatedly to the same person or the same population over time, would you get similar results? Because if not, what happens is you sort of have like an elastic ruler. Every time you apply it, you're getting a slightly different measure. What you want is it to be durable in terms of reliability. So statisticians and people who use these measures need to read the psychometric reports on how those measures are developed. How valid are they? How reliable? And another big issue is, what was the nature of the population on which they were developed in field testing? If you are developing a measure, let's say, for example, and this is very common in research, where professors at universities use their students to develop certain kinds of instruments. I'm not necessarily talking about the ones for kids. But the population on which you normed it is largely to be white, upper middle class, and educated. Then it raises the question, does it work with populations who are less educated or populations who are people of color? These are all the factors that you need to consider when you're making a decision about a test. I'm sure that most of these school measures, because they've been tested and retested and looked at in public schools, probably have very wide applicability, and we would be looking for that. But it starts out with the understanding of the psychometrics, and then it's a judgment call on your part as to whether the report convinces you that this is an instrument that you want to use. It ultimately comes down to an assessment of the science.
So I guess what concerns me then is I'm trying to think through this, because unfortunately we don't have the leveling of the playing field, as you would say. How do we then, from our perspective, really measure the success of what we're doing based on this differing metrics and differing review?
My advice is to use more than one. I guess what I'm saying is use more than one. And if they are all telling you the same thing or moving in the same direction, to me, that's more evidence, more confidence that the kids are actually making progress.
So what we're really looking for is some constant between the three, or how many?
Looking at some correlation between the three. I wouldn't even say constant.
Okay.
And do they seem to hang together? Do they seem to hang together? The more they hang together, for me as a researcher and a statistician, the more confidence I would have in those. I'm just saying that sometimes I think we get into debates about a single measure, and I just want to caution us that there could be a downside to that. That's all.
Makes sense. Thank you.
Mr. Ongst.
And I don't want to belabor it. I think I understand what you're saying. So, to me, probability is predicting future events and statistics is analyzing past events.
That's right.
What we're trying to do is analyze these programs on performance to date. But it sounds like what you're saying to me is that we don't have enough experience yet with the programs or with the different formulas to determine whether the formulas are actually effective at measuring the effectiveness, or whether the formulas are reliable in measuring the effectiveness of the programs?
What I'm saying is, are the measures reliable? There's a couple of things embedded in what you said. Let me pick them apart. The first is, are the instruments we're using really reliable measures of the children's literacy levels? Number one. In other words, are we really measuring literacy? Okay. The other thing is, let's assume that we're confident that we are, just for a moment. One of the reasons it's important to have the programs use at least some measures in common is, let's say we wanted to know if the iReady approach seems stronger than some other approach. We need a measure that we apply to both of them. Otherwise, it's not even measuring apples and oranges. It's like a fruit salad. You got 3 different modalities with 3 different sets of measures, and we're trying to correlate and make judgments on them. And I think for providers on the ground, if I were delivering a program and I could say to you, my students did well on 3 validated measures as opposed to 2 or 1, I'm even more confident in what the results of my program are. My only point in all of this is for us to remember that there are upsides and downsides to all of these instruments, and not to be absolutist about anyone.
Well, I wanted to share, I've had two good conversations. I'm going to take this one. I've had two good conversations with Dr. Grego relative to this. And, I think to Barbara's point, more evidence-based, which, by the way, the measures that have already been done and that Patrick will present are evidence-based and well-respected
Right.
tools. It is, they have been, one at least, has been used some by the school system. The school system would say their gold standard is, and it was our intention to use, the FSA. But it wasn't administered one of these 2 years, so we couldn't do it. Their second choice would be, as Dr. Grego mentioned, I think at our last meeting, would be the MAP testing that the schools do 3 times a year. That's not a tool we're as comfortable with, and it's, this stuff is more complicated than just, coming out, popping out a number and knowing, saying, oh, good, thumbs up. It takes analysis and it takes interpretation. And Dr. Grego is well aware of that. I think if you were here, what he would say is he wants to see, and by the way, we agree and are working to do this, that both the agencies and JWB put our data through, if you will, or analyze our data, the results from these 3 programs via the MAP program. How well did the kids do on MAP, these specific kids who were in fact in these 3 programs? That's going on right now, but it's not ready for prime time. And so Dr. Grego and my discussion yesterday was, okay, we've got good indication that from 3 evidence-based measures or metrics, that all 3 of these programs are making a difference, a meaningful difference in literacy. And Patrick will present far more detail on that. We don't yet have the MAP data analyzed for that same population of kids, but we're working on it together. In other words, we are going in the same direction. And that's really what Dr. Grego wanted to see is, we may not be perfectly where we would want to be, but we are working parallel and in concert and in collaboration with, whatever you want to say, with the school system, attempting at every point to measure things in the way that they believe is most meaningful. And to Barbara's point, that might be one of the 2 measurements we have. And what you'd like to see is that they both show essentially the same trend. And if you added a third, likewise, that they do, or if they don't, you dig deeper and try to figure out why. So I basically put the question to Dr. Grego to say, we have 2 of these programs that are proposing and ready to stand up an expansion of their program over the summer. And we saw it, they didn't come to us, we went to them and said, we know COVID slide is a big deal. We have evidence, not perfect evidence, but good evidence that your programs, that all 3 of your programs are making a difference, that more kids are reading on grade level and or more kids are moving towards grade level. If they were 2 grade levels behind, now they're 1 grade level behind, for instance. And while we weren't able to measure the entire population because we didn't have a pre and post on everybody, we still had a sample size of over 300 to be looking at, which is pretty meaningful. So it's not perfect, but in the spirit of not letting the perfect get in the way of the very good, and not wanting to lose this summer
frankly, we had a lot of discussion of, well, can we just move this discussion to May when maybe we'll know more about what the MAP data says? The fact is, in fairness to the two programs who are ready to stand up a program for the summer, May's just too late. I mean, it's just, even May, whatever it is really not enough time to hire people, good people, correctly and get it set up properly. One or two of them might give the old college try, but the fact is that's really not the best thing to do for our kids. And that's what we all care about, is doing the best we can for our kids. So we have 3 programs that we have observed, that we have received testing data on, and we continue. I mean, it's a journey. It's not a one point in time. But so far, what we have, even with COVID and even with all the difficulties, are very good indications that these programs are making a difference. So Dr. Grego's, his ultimate conclusion was, okay, and he didn't put it quite this way, but basically, okay, Beth, if you're telling me, if you're sort of committing that we're going to continue to work together, we're going to continue to try to measure things in the same way, we're going to try to approach reading and literacy in the same way, then I absolutely think, yes, we want to see these programs in the summer. And because I said, should we just pull it off the agenda? I mean, are you not comfortable? And I said, if we push it, we basically won't have those programs in the summer. And if that's that's the right answer, that's okay. But there are kids we believe would benefit. And he said, no, he's doing a lot of things in the summer, standing up a lot of full day work. And this would be additive. And frankly, for the number in the entire school system, it's a relatively small number. But the point we might make is there are likely kids who will come to Bridget's program who wouldn't go to a school. There are likely kids who are already part of the Boys and Girls Club family and consider that their sort of emotional home. And frankly, the same is true with Shirley Proctor Puller, who are more likely to go there than they are to go to a school where they have, which reminds them that they have been failing, by the way. I mean, it's the buildings in which they've been failing. But to come to a smaller environment or environment that includes other components of youth development and creativity and fun and play and all the rest of that, we believe is the right thing to do. So I just wanted you to know, I mean, it's dicey for me to try to channel Dr. Grego here, but what I did want you to know is, bottom line, he believed we should do this.
I'm going to pipe in. I'm looking at Mr. Feeney. It's almost too soon to make some summary comments because we haven't heard the analysis we already have from Patrick. I guess I'm of the mindset, I'm dialing back to when we made these decisions that weren't easy. And our job as a board is to make sure that we're getting the most out of our taxpayer dollars. There's no surprise here. So we're always looking at an evaluation result that's going to confirm that we're spending our money wisely. Recognizing the literacy program had to go a little upstream because of COVID. Recognizing this program began with children who were struggling beyond at the lower end of the spectrum. So it's a much higher climb. Recognizing Barbara's comments that yes, in an ideal world, we would have those multiple evaluation pieces. But even before we go forward, I want to state that this board will hopefully agree with me that we will continue to monitor this program very closely, with as many data points as we can to ensure because we were all in the beginning of this to ensure that we are in fact getting the best return on the taxpayer dollar, because Dr. Grego is watching it right along with us and may not be at the table today, but you can hear from Beth. He's watching it very closely because he knows what the quality of these programs, the outcome, and the dollar amount that goes with it. So with that, I would like to transition to the data analysis, and I'm the one that's going to ask the first question to make sure it's addressed as you go through it. I'm looking at the very top right-hand side, total enrollment, 715, analysis eligible, 45% at 324. So I would like to see that point addressed and let us know why. Okay? Thank you so much.
I do want to introduce Mike Feeney. He's the Executive Director of Elementary Education. I don't think that everyone knows him, so I was remiss in doing that in the opening. So now I'm going to turn it over to Patrick Pigeon. He's Senior Evaluator for JWB.
Good morning. I'm excited to be back to discuss this very important topic with you all. So I'll get straight to the point. Well, I'll give a quick overview. So last time we were here, basically the charge from the board was to come back with a more comprehensive analysis using the diagnostic data that we have on these three promising programs, and to specifically stratify this analysis by our at-risk population, that being students who entered program reading below grade level. I will cover that in kind of 3 phases here, or 3 sections. I believe you have a 1-pager as part of your board packet. It says fiscal year 20 literacy outcomes at the top. So you can reference that as we work through. I'll first cover an overview of the population served. I will then go through kind of where this population was at program entry or at the beginning of the fiscal year, and then where this population ended up at program exit or the end of the fiscal year. I do want to remind you that this is a fiscal year 20 analysis, meaning that it pertains to data collected in children served from October 1st, 2019 through September 30th, 2020. So we have a total enrollment in fiscal year 20 of 715 children, ranging from K to grade 11. And as we covered last month, we see the majority of those students, and as is noted on the 1-pager, about 72% in that K to 3 range. This is something that we highlight and we'll underscore later as well, because that is a critical phase of literacy development. And of course, our grade level reading campaign emphasizes having children on grade level by grade 3. To the point about being analysis eligible. So children had to kind of clear 2 benchmarks to be included in analysis. 1, they had to have a matched pre-post score, and 2, they had to have an episode length of at least 3 months. That is to say that their dosage of time in program was substantial enough that we would feel confident saying that a matched pre and post score would be an indicator of their progress during time within the program. Further, it would not be possible for a child to have a pre and post score in time less than three months. These 3 programs very much align with the schools in that they test typically in the fall, the winter, and the spring. So you only have those 3 testing phases, roughly 6 months apart each. So a child who would have even qualified, and this was a small portion of the 324 that you see, who would have had kind of been in that lower end, so closer to 3 months in the program and a pre and post that were only 3 months apart, you're looking at a child who may have entered late in a school year, so had gotten that kind of, or early in the summer, so maybe a May, June testing score, and then maybe, that August, September, October testing score as well. So when you look at that, that is accounting for a significant reason as to why that number drops so significantly. Further to that point, we have children who, of course, at the midway point of the fiscal year, had entered COVID, had entered virtual instruction, and for various understandable reasons, may or may not have continued within that program. What is promising is that the overwhelming majority, and upwards to 95% of students who participated in the program in fiscal year 20, did receive an intake score, an initial diagnostic assessment. So as to say, once they entered the program, they were tested. Whether or not their time in program aligned with the testing timeline, again, with the constraints brought upon by COVID and virtual instruction, that then influenced whether or not they had a matched post assessment. So that's kind of the overview. I can get into more detail at risk of getting a little overly granular, but I will leave that to your discretion, Madam Chair. Okay, okay, thank you. And please feel free at any point to ask any questions you may see fit. So from there, I'll move down to the second section with the headline being that most students reading below grade level, mainly 1 to 2 grades. At this point forward on our one pager, and at this point forward in the discussion, we are discussing the analysis sample. So we are discussing the 324 students. We do feel very strongly here at JWB that this is a representative, reliable sample given the population. For reference, our overall population, the 715, 77% of those students entered program reading below grade level. For our analysis sample, as you'll see in that second table in the second section, 87% of the analyzed sample were reading below grade level. And as you'll also see there, most of those students, around 71%, were 1 to 2 grade levels below. Okay. Moving on to where they've ended up. So the headline there being that over half of at-risk readers improved at least 1 grade level. Based on each program's diagnostic assessment, so for the Shirley Proctor Puller Foundation and Y Reads, that would be iReady, and for the Boys and Girls Clubs, that is Let's Go Learn's Diagnostic Online Reading Assessment, which we call DORA. These are 2 tools, and I don't think a lot of people know this, but Let's Go Learn was kind of the basis for the iReady tool. All right, so these tools were developed out of UC Berkeley. DORA was developed, has kind of a longer and more time-tested research base, and then iReady was developed kind of on top of that. So when we start to look at why 2 different tools, how do they align, there is a pretty significant relationship there. But back to the table, we did see at post that over half, about 54% of these at-risk readers improved at least 1 grade level during their time in program. Probably more importantly, or more significantly, we did find that over a quarter, and this is overall and also across each of the 3 programs, about 25% of students who entered program reading below grade level tested at post or at program exit or end of fiscal year, now having recovered enough to be on grade level. Most of those students recovered just 1 grade level, about 81% of those, with the remaining recovering 2 grades. And finally, what we can see here is that from pre to post, the number of students reading on grade level from this analysis sample in these programs nearly tripled. We saw an increase from pre of 13% of students reading on grade level to at post, 36%. And again, drawing you back to that point of that significant period of development in K to 3, we saw a really promising increase from 12% of K to 3 students on grade level at pre to 40% on grade level at post. So that covers the one pager, and I'm happy to take any questions at this time.
Mr. Ongst?
Just real quick, so, and you may not be able to tell us this, but this is one of the kind of things that I'm interested in terms of efficacy. So I think you said that at least half improved one grade level, and then there were 25% who were on grade level by the time they were done. And of that 25% that were on grade level, 81% had improved one grade level, and then the remainder 19 had improved more than one grade level, which is obviously great.
Correct.
2 grade levels, which is really impressive. But I guess my question is, for those half that improved at least one grade level, it sounds like a lot of those would have been included in the 81% that were now on to grade level. Is there any way for us to tell whether those remainders that improved at least one grade level but were still below the expected grade level, was that something, is there any way to tell how much we actually impacted those folks, or if that was just something that they would have achieved regardless of whether they've gone into these programs? I guess that's what I'm trying to get at.
That's a great question. That is part of the analysis that we will continue to doing, but that is something that I am not prepared to speak on in this moment, but it's certainly something we could prepare.
And I know, like, it just like Chair Ralston said, I mean, this is something that we started
Yeah.
recently, and I understand it's very complicated, and I know we're not gonna have all these answers,
Right.
but just so you know, that's the kind of information I'd like to see if we can try to attempt to develop as we go forward to judge, just how well these programs are working and what we can do better potentially in the future. So.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you. Oh, Barbara?
Yeah, I want to say that's an excellent question, but the other thing that I think is important as a framework here is if you talk to educators, if you looked at what was happening in Florida, across the country with the COVID slide, the difficulty students had transitioning to virtual environments, what was going on in their homes and communities. What's amazing to me, honestly, is that they did as well as they did. I actually thought that with the slide, the performance would go down. So even if we're maintaining or lifting up children by one grade level, considering the context, I think that that's something to be pleased about. That's just my own personal comment on that.
Mr. McCurrick?
Staying in line with, I think, where Brian was heading to, but also just kind of connecting to what was just brought up. We're dealing with a COVID slide. I will, from a statistical perspective, I'm not so sure how important it is to me to know the overall when it comes out to, if it was 81, I just add them up, I can come up with a number. But that's not to me the important piece. I think what I'd love to be able to see is to statistically break down into the individual levels to really understand that who shifted and where, and based on what that's helped create that. But I'd also like to ask that we really start to take a look at, I want to use COVID as a positive in this process, because we may never have gotten to the realization that our measurements are not quite where they should be. So we have an opportunity now to almost kind of start over. And by doing that, let's go back through, not go back through, but let's go through and identify with our partners, what are the right, how should we really be looking at this based on the tools that we're using, and where do they correlate? And then how do we find that somewhat of a common ground to allow us to really understand and impact the change that's required? And also understanding that somehow with the school system, we have to expand this. If we're really showing some real value, and I think we're about to see that, we need to expand that. We need to expand the reach that we all have together. Whether we have 11%, they have 86%, whatever the numbers turn out to be. I want to see that to be a 96% total across the board, and that's how we're all working together to change this dynamic. I hope that someday, somewhere along the way, we're going to figure this out, get out of the different levelings of people and who and where, and really get to, I have a child that really is improving or needs to improve, and that we're going to do whatever it takes to make that happen. So again, I ask that we really really break down and to get together with our partners and really come up with what is the right diagnostic? How do we correlate these pieces together? How does that fit with the school system? And so that we're coming to some correlation and common ground that says we're either making an improvement or our dollars are being spent in the wrong direction. So let's readjust them. Okay.
Seeing no other lights on the analysis, I think, Judith, you're back up, but before you leave again, I think you're hearing from the board pretty significantly to get to the deepest level you can on data analysis. And at the end of the presentation, we'll decide when the next presentation, possibly after the summer, to see how the kids did during the summer. And I would encourage our partners to look at the analysis eligible children and see if we can't push that number up just a little bit. I do know that needing the 3 months of a FaceTime is a challenge during these periods of time, but I would just put that out there. Judith, you're going to talk about the actual expansion dollars and how each program will use those dollars.
Thank you. I'm going to walk through these one at a time, again, allowing the leaders to speak just for a few minutes on the impact of the expansion. So I'm going to start with Shirley Proctor Puller Foundation and their Master Kids Program expansion. That's what we currently fund. They are requesting to expand their programming to a second location that would serve 100 more students. That's doubling their capacity. They're focusing on high-need areas, Campbell Park and Jordan Park. This programming occurs 5 days a week during the summer for 8 hours and a full-on rep program around the school day. So you're going to see two different numbers. One number is what the cost would be this fiscal year to expand, and that's the $249,277. And then for the full year, annualized, it would be $589,515. So with the board's permission, I'm going to turn it over to Bridget Heller, who's going to speak to the impact of the program.
Good morning. So I think Patrick has already spoken to the overall impact. I'll talk about the expansion piece, but before I do that, I just want to start by actually thanking, you can hear me, right? Like this, okay. So I just want to start by, again, thanking the management team at JWB as well as this board for leaning in to fund this program in 2019 in the summer. I realized that we were a quote unquote non-traditional program for you guys, given our size and our lack of financial length, if you will, in terms of the number of years in which we had been in existence, and therefore the number of financial years you had to evaluate us on. And so I really appreciate the fact that you did lean in and take that risk on us. And for those of you who weren't here, it was quite a process. So, and a positive one. So not to be denoted in any way. And we are in some ways very different, as you can see. And that's the one thing that I really want to focus on as meaningful for our expansion. I love partnering with Freddie and Tim because I think that, together we represent a huge opportunity in the community, but we are a different type of program in that we are of the community. We actually house ourselves within buildings within the community, largely churches. We've done this in one church. The results that you're seeing are coming from one church. And the way we would go about expanding is going to a second church. We would be expanding with Mount Zion Progressive, which is, for those of you who know him, Pastor Freddie Murphy's church. And so that is how we would be expanding going forward. We would look to have the same sort of key elements that we think make our program hugely successful. And a lot of this actually really goes back to what the school system recommends. And that is, we are highly intensive. We are one-on-one lot of face-to-face coaching. And as we went through the COVID time period and we did a number of the pivots, that was really critical for our success. When we pivoted in March, we immediately started taking care of kids' needs in the community in the ways of hunger, in the ways of, really, do they have a place to go after school? Are they going to be alone? Are they going to be supervised? Those kinds of questions we could actually go to families and ask, whereas the school can't necessarily ask those questions. We could make sure that those kids were cared for in a different way. And so we did that. And that's actually how we manage in the summer. So every kid, it is about the numbers. You're absolutely right. It's about the numbers, but it's also about what happens beyond the numbers. So for us, it is that we have delivered, X%, but it's also about the kids who aren't performing. We know exactly what's happening in their lives that's driving that lack of performance. I know, for example, the one kid that's not performing, or the two kids that are not performing in my system right now. One is due to dosage because you can't get her there. She's just moving around. She's very nomadic and you can't get her there. The other one is dealing with a situation from a impact standpoint where there's a single parent who they went through a divorce situation. And you know what? Right now they're in the courts battling some stuff. And so the child can't focus. So we know it is really more in depth beyond the numbers. It's about the child and how we're caring for that family and that child that makes us different in terms of that intensity of face-to-face intervention. As I always say, we are from the community. And what we love to say is the primary difference about being from the community or of the community is that we believe and we seek a shared accountability for the educational outcomes of our children. We do not seek to replace in any way or challenge in any way the work that the Pinellas County school system does. Instead, we want to support that work. We truly believe that a trusted community of elders that have a role in reinforcing and helping drive educational outcomes for the children in our community is something to be valued and something that we can provide. And so that's where we step up. And then I guess I'll end. I won't talk so much about COVID because I do think that Judith did that. As Judith said, we will expand to cover 100 additional children during the summer. We will get to that number at Pastor Murphy's church. It's a huge church for those of you who don't know it or who it's on the Deuces. It's literally one block off. It literally covers that whole Jordan Park community. And it reaches over and picks up John Hopkins because we go K-8 or K-9. And so it picks up all of those kids potentially in that community. They have a school there during the day that they are really eager to have some of the kids flow from there into our program. The kids in that school are underperforming and we're trying to support that as well. So those kinds of things are the things that we believe will have a huge impact, and we know that the community is eager to have us there. We've already had several conversations. So as I end, I will just leave you with a reminder of one of the favorite scenes of mine personally from the video that was done to really remember Bernie McCabe, because I thought that was an excellent video that you guys shared last month. And I think that it was Bob Dillinger in the video who really talked about accountability, and that Bernie was a kid, a real proponent for accountability and always asking two questions. One is the question of, are the kids better off? And the second being, was it a good investment, which I think was already echoed in the room. And I hope that we can convince you that we are both. The kids are better off for having spent time with the folks in our community. Again, certified teachers that are delivering the educational programming, as well as extracurriculars that really reinforce that educational programming, bringing in as many community resources as we can to impact those children during the day, that they're with us during the summer. We just think that they're better off all around. And again, we do believe we're a great investment for the results that we deliver, but also for the fact that We're not bringing additional overhead or anything like that. We really are a completely virtual program. So when you look at our numbers, you may say per student, it's a really high number, but just be assured that all of that is going directly to service delivery. It's not in a building, it's not on a floor, it's none of that. It's all service delivery. And I, as a volunteer CEO, truly appreciate your support. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'm going to defer to Michael Freeney. He's let us know that he's a little time sensitive, and I'd really like you to make some comments before you have to leave the meeting.
So good morning, and thank you, Madam Chair, board members, and everyone in attendance today. I just want to, again, thank you for inviting me today, and thank you for all the work that we're doing. I want to just kind of piggyback off what Dr. Morrison said, is that especially in the school district, we feel it's extremely valuable and extremely important to triangulate data. When we look at all the different data sources that we have, we never really look at just one in judging a program. And so we're constantly triangulating data, and I think that's extremely important. I've been working with Judith and Patrick on several different projects, and we do have a data sharing agreement. And so I think one of the things that we can provide as a school district is multiple data points, and rather than asking our providers to have multiple assessments, we could probably share some of those assessments that we use as we look at triangulating and really digging deeper into the data. Kind of piggybacking off of Ms. Heller, one of the challenges that we are always faced with is really trying to determine if a program itself is successful, because there's so many different things that come into play. What happens with our students before school? What programs are they accelerated into, or do they have opportunity to be involved in? Who their teacher is, what happens during the school day, what happens after school, and then all of our community partners. And so it definitely is a shared accountability piece. And so when we do look at any program, we also try to compare similar populations to a program or to the whole, to see, is the growth that this program is making, is it the same or greater than other like students? And so we try to do that as well. But again, as I said, it's very hard to really look at one program and say this is the one program that's making a difference without looking at multiple data points. But we also recognize that every intervention and every opportunity for our students is an additional opportunity to help close any achievement gaps. So again, I want to thank everybody who continues to serve the students in Pinellas County. I'm happy to answer any questions that anybody may have, but I do apologize because I do have to go run and present to all of our elementary principals here in just a minute. So I'll pause to see if anybody has any questions for me.
I don't see any lights for questions, and we appreciate you being here very much. I think we heard from Beth that she has had multiple conversations with Dr. Grego. So the fact that the school system is partnering in tandem with us on this, we appreciate you and your engagement with us.
Thank you. You guys have a wonderful day.
Judith, back to you.
Okay, great. I'm going to move on now to the second expansion, which is the YMCA of Greater St. Pete Y Reads programs. They want to expand into additional schools, including Bear Creek, Lynch Elementary, Bay Point Elementary, Bay Point Middle School, and Melrose Elementary. They will serve an additional 350 students through this expansion. So the request for this fiscal year is $131,820, and for annualized for next year is $597,525. And so with that, I will now turn it over to Mr. Staley.
Thank you, Judith, and members of the board and Mrs. Houghton. I appreciate the time to be here. Sorry about the masks. They're difficult to talk through. The Y Reads program, just to bring everyone into the same context, has been in here in Pinellas County for about 15 years. We've run it at many different elementary schools. Right now, we're focused on Perkins Elementary School, Jamerson, Sawgrass, Sexton, and Frontier, along with 2 middle schools, which you generously gave us the opportunity to start to last year, which was Pinellas Park and Meadowlawn. And so the idea behind Y Reads is it is a tutorial literacy program that's in the schools after school. And the beauty of the program that we have is twofold. Number one, our full-time coordinators work directly with the principals and the staff, the teachers, to determine what children need extra literacy reading help. They're directed to our program after school, and they get intense 1-to-1, 1-to-2, up to 1-to-4 tutorial programs. And the second really nice part of it is we blend volunteers along with our teaching staff who are paid. As an example, my wife is a 30-year retired teacher, and she volunteers for Y Reads, and she's done it. This is her 5th year that she volunteers, and the consistency of teachers such as her is what helps make our program really, really strong and give us the results we want. We'd like to expand, as Judith said, to the schools that she identified. Those schools are ones that we have very strong principal support. And this is something I'd love it if Dr. Grego was here just to thank him. The core on all of this is the principal support. When you have principals who are letting our team talk to teachers about direct effects of our program on the children, talking to them about which children are strong and weak, and being able to take them then after school to focus on a longer day in specific areas has really made a huge difference in the literacy piece for these children. So being able to almost double the size of our program and the reach of our program into these new elementary and middle schools will just give us a greater reach and help more Pinellas County children. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I would agree the communication with the school is vital for success. Very impressive.
Okay, and last for the instruction and maintenance, we have Boys and Girls Club of the Suncoast. In their community out of school time, they want to expand by 500 children to 4 clubs. And those clubs are the Royal Theater, Northside Club, Ridgecrest, and a newly formed Salvation Army Academy. They also have a virtual club that literacy services will be delivered as well. So their request is, let's see here, for this fiscal year, $436,201, and an annualized amount of $1,094,525. So that is for the clubs. Now, in addition, the Boys and Girls Club has a middle school academy, and they also want to really double down on intensive literacy services in the middle school academy. So for that, for this fiscal year, the request is $13,311, and then annualized, that would be, I lost my number there, $34,707. So Freddie, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Thank you, Judith. Madam Chair, members of the board, thank you for the opportunity to provide some insight of Boys and Girls Club and how we plan to redefine the opportunity equation for kids here in Pinellas County, working in concert with the school district, working in concert with many of our program partners. First and foremost, thank you for your foresight and courage for being able to invest and to lean into something that's so critical in our community. I also want to thank you. I was blown away just hearing from just good governance practices and being able to bring your respective skill sets to be able to help us really think about things differently so we can provide the best opportunities for kids here in Pinellas County. The request that we have represents a couple different approaches, and what we really try to work and strive towards is getting to the core of equity, making sure that we can meet kids for where they're at and applying the same rigor that we would for our own children. I have kids that are school age, and I want to ensure that the same opportunities and experiences that we provide for our daughter, we would apply it to all the Boys and Girls Clubs and all of our program partners' children. Mr. McCarrick, at the last board meeting, you had referenced the tremendous work that the school district's providing and being able to see it through your grandchildren. And we want to make sure that we can provide that same level of intensity to all the kids throughout Pinellas County. Outside of just being able to provide a wonderful program opportunity, what the Juvenile Welfare Board staff, management staff, and team has done has allowed us to really innovate and partner in ways that we've never been able to do before. Looking back at the onset of this RFP, we saw this as somewhat of a hyper-competitive process where we're competing for literacy funds, yet we've been able to forge partnerships and friendships that we would have never been able to imagine. A case in point is when the pandemic first hit, again, applying the same level of intensity we would for our own children. I'll never forget getting a call from Bridget Heller at 7 o'clock in the morning saying, Freddie, I have a parent that needs a place for her kid right now. She has to go to work and she has no support and no care. What can we do? I said, well, Bridget, our clubs aren't operational right now. Let's see if we can get the YMCA on the call. Within 5 minutes, David Jezik picked up the phone and said, we're going to find a way to make this work. He then got Tim enlisted at the YMCA. And we found a place to make sure that that child had a safe and nurturing environment so they could thrive. Those are some of the experiences and partnerships that this literacy initiative has allowed us to do. Getting back into seeing how we can leverage COVID and the opportunities that it's presented us to be able to think about things differently and reimagine the future, our expansion proposal also incorporates portions of, portions of that, which includes looking at targeted communities at the Salvation Army, a new academy there, which would allow us to be able to find a highly transient community and see ways that we can create a spoken wheel concept with many of our other Boys and Girls Clubs. I had the privilege of talking to Dr. Grego last week as well. We spent about an hour to see how we can really double down on our partnerships with the school district and work in tandem to leverage one another's resources, leverage one another's skills and abilities to see how we can put kids front and center. We look forward to continuing to drive that partnership at a deeper level. And we look forward to being able to see how we can triangulate data, use data in the best way possible to create clearer lead indicators to ensure that we can be as efficient as possible moving into the future. The ability to, this is not a zero-sum game in terms of what measurement tool is most appropriate. This is a matter of us being able to see how we can take all of the different information that we have, all of the different skills and resources to help give kids a fighting chance here in this community. Something else that's represented within our proposal is being able to innovate and think of things in traditional ways of thinking, which is represented in our virtual club hub. Through my conversation with Dr. Grego, he said, Freddie, I want to challenge you to think bigger and bolder. We're not going to achieve what we need to achieve looking at a couple hundred kids at a time. We need to be thinking about thousands, tens of thousands of kids. How do we set aside traditional ways of thinking? How do we set aside traditional ways of partnering? And this is what our partnership, working with the Shirley Proctor Pillar Foundation, the YMCA, and working with the Juvenile Welfare Board, to set aside traditional ways of thinking, to see how we can compartmentalize what works so we can replicate and bring services to scale in the community to create meaningful impact. When we look at the headlines 5 years from now, we want to lead the state. We want people to say, what in the world happened in Pinellas County? And we want to look at this Juvenile Welfare Board and look at that being the common denominator to see they had the courage to step up and do more and be more for kids. So we've brought an entrepreneurial spirit in part of our proposal, which is allowing us to plan and test, measure, innovate, pivot. And that's what we're doubling down with some of our virtual clubs. So something that's not represented in this proposal is that by 2024, that we hope to be able to serve upwards of 2,500 additional kids through this virtual platform. That's a conservative approach because we want to ensure that we can really get to the core of what works, be as vulnerable as possible to see what we may need to sunset, what we may need to see if we can accelerate so we can actually give kids the best opportunity possible. So again, thank you very much. We look forward to working with our wonderful partners that I just don't want to call partners. I see these as friends. And I will be remiss to say that partnerships is a word that's tossed around pretty frequently. I like to give an example of as we go through Boys and Girls Club strategic plan, we went to our partners to help us inform our decisions. Bridget and David, Scott Goyer, all of our out-of-school time partners didn't hesitate to take the phone call, to talk with our consultants, to see how we can work collectively to make a difference here in the community. So I look forward to working with each and every one of you here, making a difference. Thank you.
Thank you, Freddie. Checking for lights. Judge Moore?
I've had the opportunity to work with each and every one of the programs, and I'll start with the why. Being a mom, my daughter didn't do the after school, she did the actual center, and in the summer, second to none. It was like she was in school second to none. And if you guys have not had the opportunity to go to the spelling bee that they do, and hopefully they still do it at the Charles Park YMCA, if you just stop by and you look in the classrooms, and they all have glasses, you will see that they're actually learning. They have field trip time, but they're actually in school during the summer because they work with some of the failing schools in their areas and those teachers and those principals. And so they know who's in those centers. And so I took my child there because I was interested, because I had always gone to that spelling bee and I wanted her to be a part of the spelling bee. So I put her in that Y for a reason. I wanted to see if it was just all smoke and mirrors. But believe me, there was no gap because I took her out of her school that had a summer program, and then I put her in the Y, second to none. I volunteered at the Royal Theater, and in fact, as far as the virtual part is concerned, I'm in the organization, and you're right. By the time we ended the numbers went up. When COVID, your numbers were down in our virtual mentoring, but by the time we did our last presentation, it had gone up, and we want to continue to partner with your program. But Shirley Proctor, they brought me in prior to pre-COVID. And when I tell you of the community, they knew. They brought me in to do a spiel, but they had a couple kids that they needed me to pull to the side. And I thought I was just gonna be in and out. But because those teachers knew that those kids wanted to spend some extra time, and we talked about different careers and all of the above, that I really enjoyed. I was quite impressed. I wasn't sure what I was going to walk into, so to speak, but I was well impressed that they do know the kids, they do know the families, and there is trust. And as stated, that I may not send my kid to summer school, but I will send my child there because I know that DCF was not going to get a 1-800 DCF call, that it is going to be about education. And you might trust me enough as a parent to, yes, I'm going through this divorce, and yes, it is not good. And yes, I had to call you at 7 o'clock in the morning, but you didn't call DCF, you call your partners. And I think we have to look at it from that lens, knowing the family, knowing the children, because guess what? If something's going on in the household, they can't learn. But if the parents feel comfortable enough to send them there to bridge that gap, knowing that DCF is not going to be called, then I think we can help bridge that gap. So I want to say kudos to all of these programs.
Thank you, Judge Moore. It's always good to hear things from your perspective. Mr. McCurrick?
It's tough to follow Judge Moore. Freddie, that was an incredible message that you provided, and showing the relationships that we're hoping for. And so if you could get 50% of what you just talked about in the time frame that you said, I would be excited. But I know you guys, and I am extremely pleased with the Shirley Proctor Puller Foundation, because you were right, we didn't know you. But what we've seen so far and what we expect is much, much more. And the value that you're creating, the same as the Y, the same as the Boys and Girls Club. We're now, maybe, I'm hoping that we're now starting to see that gelling of a community and a neighborhood, and of people coming together to finally say, okay, enough's enough. Let's make sure our kids have the opportunities they really, really deserve. So again, I thank all of you for all the hard work that you've done and what I expect to see going forward. And again, I love the fact that going back with the Pinellas County school system and coming up with that common ground, coming up with that correlation is critical, I believe, to the success of where we're headed, and how to best use the funds that we're going to be providing, others will provide from the taxpayer dollars. So again, thank you all for the great work that you've done so far, and I look forward to seeing more.
Thank you. And Mr. Ongst?
Yeah, I just wanted to clarify. So the action item for today is for the expansion, the requested expansions for this current fiscal year. And then the annualized number that Judith provided would be part of the budgeting process. So in other words, we're not approving any funds to be expended outside of the current budget for this fiscal year. Is that
That's
correct?
correct. We just want to make sure we're transparent in that you can expect to
Right.
see those annualized amounts as part of our 22 budget. So yes, that's.
And
that's right.
I just want to point out, I mean, it's a lot of money, you know, on an annualized
Mhm.
basis, it's a lot. It's at least more than $2 million. And is that
Correct.
on top of what we're already doing? So in other words, it's not going to be $2 million. It's going to be, how much do we know? Yeah, so it's a lot of money, and I think it's money well spent, but we have to make sure it's money well spent. And I appreciate all of you. First off, you took a big risk in putting all the time and effort into doing this and launching it. We couldn't do it without you, so I really appreciate that. Number two, it sounds like you guys are bending over backwards to work together and to work with us and the school district. So I really appreciate that as well. And just know that it's something that this is money well spent, but I also have to make sure that it continues to be well spent. And so it's not a scrutiny because we don't trust that you're doing good work. It's just a scrutiny of it's just a big investment and we need to make sure we're doing it right. So thank you guys for doing it right and helping us. And I'd be in favor of making a motion to approve item 3A.
I'm a little, we can take the motion in a second, but we are not finished with the presentation yet. So I may want to defer the vote for a minute. And I also want to just respond a moment to Board Member Ongst. You're obviously aware that we're dedicating a lot of time to today's presentation, having our partners here, having the full presentation on evaluation of where we are thus far. So again, the board chair notes that this has been, Beth and I have had several conversations about this before we got to today's meeting. I just I think, Mr. Ongst, thank you. This is a lot of money. Our partners are hearing us. We're going to be monitoring closely. We're going to be working very closely with you. And we gladly take this somewhat of a risk, but just want to make sure we make that point. And Judith, you have one more, the Art Club.
Right, and that is part of the program outreach grant. So they are requesting an additional $10,000 to their budget annually to serve 352 more youth in their Build Your Child's Reading Superpower Superhero campaign. So they will use the $10,000 for incentives. For every child that enters the campaign, they get a reading pal, a reading mentor. And again, they have prizes and some community activities. So that was the request. Deb Ballinger unfortunately could not be here. She had a tenured employee that passed away. So the funeral was today. She gave great apologies that she could not be here.
Come back now, call for the motion. Mr. Ongst, second by Mr. McCurrick, and all in favor? Any opposed? This motion carries. Judith, do you want to stay right at that podium? We're on action item B, approve the
Yes.
policies and procedures for
Yes.
JWB committees.
So I have a partner with me here today, and that is Yarides Garcia. She is the community planning manager, and she is freshly back from Costa Rica. Don't we all wish that we could have been there? What you have in front of you are some policies and procedures. These were last looked at by the board in October of 2005, and they approved a new set of guidelines that govern the operation of the community councils. Including in the operating guidelines are the policies and procedures for the councils and other JWB committees. Today, we want to bring forward a few changes to these policies to better reflect JWB's current practices with our three councils. Community council's main role is to identify community strengths and needs in their respective geographical areas and to adopt a work plan, a strategic plan for the councils. Membership of the councils is an intentional effort from JWB staff, community at large, and other community organizations to recruit community leaders who represent the respective areas. Council members are appointed by the board, serve 2 years, and are eligible for reappointment. For over 25 years, community councils have coordinated and facilitated advocacy projects to address community needs. And we currently have 42 active council members. Yarides, is there anything you would like to add to that? Okay.
Covered everything.
Any comments or questions?
Not to be the fly in the ointment, did we run this by the community councils or did they get feedback on this?
You want to answer?
We are currently working with the community councils to review the policies as well as the bylaws because we want to make sure that they are engaged in the process. And we are starting our face-to-face meeting last week. South County had the face-to-face meeting, and today I'm having the Mid-County Community Council meeting, and then North County will have theirs on May.
All right, seeing no additional lights, I'll call for a motion. Mr. McCurrick, a second. Judge Moore, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? This motion carries. Thank you so much. Tedious work. I was surprised we hadn't seen it since 2005, so way to go. Action item number C, or letter C, approve the expansion of funding for the fatherhood program. And Jennifer Atiaga, our Assistant Manager of Program Administration, will be making the presentation. Welcome, Jennifer.
Good morning. We have a few folks joining us today. You can stand, Reggie, or if you want to sit or wherever you're comfortable. Okay. And then I do believe Amanda Crumrich from Operation PAR is also here with us. She should be joining us as well from the overflow room. Good morning. I'm really excited to be here today to share about the work that we've been doing in the Fatherhood Collaborative, and for a few reasons. One, personally, this subject matter is very near and dear to my heart. My father was really engaged with us girls as kids. He was the one running us around to our appointments, cooking dinner when my mom worked late at night, and have equally as a good relationship with my husband, who right now has our 3-year-old at an allergy appointment getting a test for allergies to cashews. So with that being said, we do have a great team. I have with us Reggie, and I do want to recognize Reggie. He is also the co-chair of the collaborative. He was here with us also a few months ago as we recognized him as the Cooperman Vogue Award winner. He and Amanda have both been vital to the partnership and are glad they can join us today. So in this work and looking at the Fatherhood Collaborative, some of the things we know. We know that over time, roles of parents have changed, right? We know that this concept of what a modern dad looks like today has evolved. Research also tells us that kids with engaged dads fare much better. The evidence is there and it's pretty simple. I believe you have a little bit of a one-pager from the National Fatherhood Initiative. For example, kids from absent father homes have more behavior problems. They are twice as likely to drop out of high school and 7 times more likely to become a teen parent. What we see locally in our JWB funded program, specifically around our prevention of abuse and neglect programs, is that the households we're serving are being identified as single female head of households at nearly 50%. So we have an opportunity. And typically we've done a really good job at engaging moms and babies. But the intention here is to be purposeful in how we're thinking about dad and our opportunities to bring him to the table. It's important when I say that, though, that the conversation doesn't become in spite of mom and the work that she's doing and the importance of that role, but how can we support that family system? Another important note is that when we say dads in the collaborative, we're talking about biological dads. We're talking about adoptive dads, stepdads, mom's boyfriends, aunts, or excuse me, uncles, grandparents, whatever male is willing and ready to be engaged in that family, we want to be supporting those relationships. So in thinking about how we could be intentional about this work, in 2019, JWB brought together a number of community partners like Amanda and Reggie, who in their own organizations were already thinking and doing some of this work. We wanted to bring those folks together and see how can we organize to expand that efforts. And we came up with two primary goals for the collaborative. The first is to really look at how we can support our existing social service staff. We know that in that arena, we have a lot, it's a female-dominated workforce. We also know that we have a number of programs, especially in that 0 to 5 space, which is really critical for our kiddos' development. It was built around and designed around moms and babies. And often designed around mom and babies, but also requires typically mom's willingness to participate in a service or an intervention for dad to be able to even be invited to the table or get an ancillary service. The second goal that we're really looking at is that community awareness. So how can we in the community, when we're out speaking, start to change that narrative and really move fathers and the concept of dads from one of risk to one of resource for the kids and the families. You can see on this slide, we have a number of community partners listed. Not exhaustive by any means. At last count, I think we were at about 20 active partners that are with us on a monthly basis, but that continues to grow over time. So accomplishments. We've listed a number of accomplishments of the collaborative for you here. I want to pull out two that we are pretty proud of, I think. The first being the unconscious bias training. So really the direction and feedback from the collaborative partners when we're looking at how can we bring training to those existing social service providers. They said, before we get to the how to do it, we need to have a conversation about why we're not doing it. What are our staff bringing to the table with their own relationships with their dads or men's in their life that may be impacting kind of how they're engaging or why they're not engaging or to what degree? We held that training back in 2019, and we had about 100 professionals there and really got a lot of really good critical feedback. We had intended to do kind of a step 2 of that until COVID stopped us a little bit, but we're consistently looking at those kind of opportunities. But for a pretty sensitive and emotional training, I think for some, it was really well received. The other thing I want to spotlight is the Connecting to Father sessions. So those are opportunities that we've held on an ongoing basis, utilizing Reggie as kind of our expert and leader in the community. And he provides staff an opportunity to talk about families they may have or get tips and tricks to how to, one, get dads at the table, but how to keep them at the table once they're there. Really working through each of those sessions to build that toolbox of our social service staff, again, very female-dominated workforce. Moving on to community awareness. This goal has been, I think, the area we've been able to be really creative in, which has been exciting. One of my favorite is actually the changing stations. We have a sample outside of that and some other things that we've worked on. But this one we really heard from dads, like, I can't change my child when I'm out and about, even at community service provider locations. So we developed this. JWB offers the changing station. We've provided the father positiving messaging developed by the collaborative. And then we're offering it to providers that are willing to do the installation at their organization or business. And then it ends up being like a 50-50 partnership in order to make this small improvement and make dads feel like they have the capability and awareness to be able to take care of their kids when they want to, when they're out. Another thing that's been really intentional is, as we're talking about literacy, following the presentation for this morning, as JWB is doing things like the book bus or other events where we're trying to encourage reading, how can we include content in those books that has positive males in it, that include father positive messaging, male role models? So we've really taken a look at that and made a dedicated effort to kind of step up our game in that regard. And the last one I'll highlight is the family time in a box. That was designed also during COVID in June as a way to say, how can we celebrate our dads, but yet encourage them those opportunities for connection? There's a sample of that outside too, but things like a movie and some popcorn and some card games that they could play with their kids in the height of COVID. And I know I mentioned COVID a little bit, and it definitely impacted, I think, the work of the collaborative, just like everyone's work here. It did require us to shift to a completely virtual environment, did postpone some of the ideas for trainings that we had and speakers we wanted to bring in. But what it did allow us is, again, creativity. During this time, with the help of our communications team, we have created a dedicated fatherhood collaborative page within the JWB website. And what's been great about this is we've developed a great repository of local resources, national resources for both dads and or providers. And folks can access the changing stations and make a request for one right through there. And then they can also access a social media toolkit that April and her team worked to develop, ready-made social media, so that if any of our partners want to encourage or put anything out there, they have kind of the content already ready and available, and it's consistent with the collaborative's messaging. Looking ahead, you'll see a lot of creative ideas up there. We do continue to meet monthly, whether it is the 2 subcommittees or the full collaborative, to again, just look at how can we continue to evolve and be creative, support our community partners, and also create more community awareness just about the importance of dads and the role that they can play in our kids' lives. We do want to show you at this time a short video, also developed during the pandemic, in an attempt to profile and celebrate the dads in a few of our JWB funded programs. I hope you enjoy.
Now more than ever, fathers make a difference in their children's lives. JWB and our partners are lifting up local dads, sharing their tough and tender sides, and showing what it means to be dad strong.
The way that I explain to them how life is, it's like a video game. You level up, you don't level down. And by doing that, it's education, work, and financial freedom.
These are very important developmental years or months for a child, especially with learning how social skills work and how to interact socially with others. So instilling those values at a very young age, all you can do is help guide it.
Basically, everything you do, they pretty much watch you. You know, pretty much how you treat people, how you carry yourself, and they pretty much watch everything. So I try to lead by example.
Actually getting to spend time with them and getting to know them, spend some time and teach my kid a lot of things that maybe I didn't have the time to do.
The coolest thing about being a dad, period, and I think she wants to answer for me. It's watching her answer questions for the first time. It's watching her want to express herself. You know, watch her.
Pretty much the best thing I would say is, like, you know, with watching your kids grow, you know, like from the moment they're born in the world, you know, being by them every step of the way as they learn how to, you know, sit up, fall, stand, walk, you know, pretty much at everything, and then when they say their first words.
Every day, what we do is go out and walk the dog so they can rest a little bit from the schoolwork. That was a bonding moment that I, as a father, have with them. It's some me time with the boys.
What I like about my dad is he has like a really good balance. When to be serious, and when to get stuff done, and when to mess around, joke around. And I don't know, it's like a perfect balance for this.
I read to them, try to, make sure they, know their letters, their numbers, how to sound out stuff. Try to do my best to try to like teach them as much as I can.
Being a good role model, so it's really just maintaining composure. You let them know like it's okay to make mistakes. It's okay to to trip up and to fall down, but you have to keep your composure. You have to keep your calm and work through the problem. Don't let it get to you.
Mainly being a good person, responsible, being a kind human being, and hopefully that be passed on to my grandkids if one day they do have kids, decide to have kids.
It's pretty much just be there for them, watch them smile, plus be very patient, because that's one thing, you gotta have patience, especially if you have more than one kid.
Kids are like a sponge. They absorb so many things.
You want to be a good father, you want to step up, and you want your kid to be like, yeah, that's my daddy. Dude's got it on lock. Like, he's got my back. If you want to be that kind of dad, it's not about you anymore. Your story's on pause. It's not over, but it's on pause.
Dads are strong. Nurturing their children and giving them a solid foundation to lead successful and satisfying lives. The Pinellas Fatherhood Collaborative is helping build strong dads. Learn more at www.jwbpinellas.org/fathers.
Okay, so with that, I will turn your attention. You do have a full memo in the board packet regarding the request for an expansion to Operation PAR's Motivating New Parents programming. The intention of this request is to really open up access for dads in our community, remove barriers for moms to be involved and at the table until we let dad at the table. So with that said, the first ask here is for the addition of a fatherhood mentor. This position would be providing direct one-on-one supports to dads and also host various community groups, both open and of active current participants throughout the month. We are looking at, so the 40 participants that you see would be the individual one-on-one, and so we expect it to be higher than when you're looking at those that may be able to come to the open community groups. And this one is also in direct correlation in terms of that group component. We find that very important. We heard through the various focus groups and conversations with dads that moms often have lots of opportunities to get together and talk about being a mother, but dads don't often have that same opportunity in natural spaces. So we're trying to, in a thoughtful way and a purposeful way, create more opportunities for them. The second is a prevention specialist. This position is designed to really look at capacity building of our other community partners. So looking outside of even those that are at the table with us already. Are there faith-based groups or different community centers that are interested in starting to deliver some father groups in their own settings? So how can we train and equip those community providers to be able to deliver an evidence-based nurturing fathers programming? With this position, in addition to the training, they'd also provide coaching and support to actually help get those groups up and running. And the goal for that would be about 24 trainings a year plus then all that supportive work. And the last is a marriage and family therapist. This position is intended to be more of an overlay for a number of PAR programs, but really looking for opportunities for those parents. And I heard it this morning that maybe we're struggling with going through a divorce and needed some additional support, where they could go and get that from a clinical position at the ready. And this one actually is an error. It's 40 families per year is what we're projecting. So then when you break it down to individuals, we're looking at 160 on an annual basis. And then those would also have clinical groups, but probably not to the extent that the first one we mentioned, the mentor position, would. The financial impact of the combination of these positions is just over $112,000 for the remainder of this fiscal year. Annualized, we're looking at just over $220,000. So I have a team here. We're happy to answer any questions about the collaborative or about the expansion request at this time.
Thank you. Checking for lights. I see Judge Moore.
Selfishly speaking, how are you guys take on clients? Can I do referrals? Can case managers do referrals?
Well, and so this is really, and I'll lean to Amanda too, but this is the design of kind of why we wanted to bring this to your guys' attention, especially, and not just for the littles, but that's where we've had traditional, a lot of our, even the small groups that we've had for dads, like Healthy Families and these groups, is it's been, we seek out mom. And then if dad happens to be in the household, we may have something for you. The intention of these are to really look, just to your point, Judge Moore, how can we make it more accessible? What if dad's not living in the home, but still needs support to be involved in the kid's life? So yes, that is our intent.
And it would be similar to what we kind of already do, Judge, with referrals in your courtroom, is you would make a referral to us and we will get them navigated into all of this. So we have the parameters there. We actually do this on an unofficial business, and we're looking to just solidify this so that we can do more. Because right now it's very limited basis that we're doing this.
This is going to be great. A lot of fathers feel that they don't have a voice. They've been brought to the dependency table, but they don't have a voice. And so with this expansion, hopefully they learn to actually speak. Sometimes they're even afraid to speak because they've been absent for whatever reason. And sometimes they don't feel worthy. And we spend a lot of time lifting moms up. But I think this is great to lift fathers up.
And to your point, one of the things that we've seen dads who've gone to the hospital, pick up their baby, and for our purposes, a substance exposed baby, that never knew they were a dad. And then they end up in front of your court going, I have a baby and I don't know what to do. And so through our Motivating New Parents, we were used to be motivating new moms. So then we said, we need to help. And that's when we started to admit fathers, but we still got more to do.
And if I can add to that, Amanda, too, I think the other intention here is to be realistic, right? And some of these projections for numbers served are just that, projections, right? But we have to be willing to meet dads truly where they are. It might be that they're not ready to go through that 13-week parenting group the day we see them. They may need help with basic needs. They may need help figuring out how to navigate the child welfare system, or child support, or visitation, or employment, right? Before then we get them at the parenting table. With then kind of the ultimate goal of that continuum is that we have healthy relationships, engagement with the kids, and co-parenting happening with moms.
I see Barbara.
Right. I just wanted to say that in my role in promoting innovation, one of the things that I think we can do much more at JWB is the replication and scaling up of good practices. There are a lot of good practices out there. And when I knew about the fatherhood initiative, I spoke to Jennifer, and I had researched a couple of evidence-based fatherhood programs. And she said to me, Operation PAR is actually using one of these interventions with good success. And my question to her is, would they be willing to train some other organizations in the application of the methodology? So we really need to do much more. Instead of having to discover, there's good stuff out there that we can promote and leverage. The other thing that I want to say, and like Jennifer, this is very personal to me. I absolutely adored my father. And when you looked at how our family was classified, my parents divorced when I was 10 years old. So I grew up in what was called a single female-headed household, except my father said to me, Your mother and I are divorcing. I am not divorcing you. And he was involved in every single aspect of my life from 10 until the day he died. This is so critically important for girls. There's a lot of notion that it's important for men to be there for their fathers. Judge Moore, you know what I'm talking about, is these young girls who get hooked up with these guys who call them baby girl. The men are looking for sex, the girls are looking for daddy. It is critical that we support good relationships of girls with their fathers, and I'm so, so excited about this.
Thank you. I'm looking for lights. Any more comments, questions? Reggie, I see you taking the podium.
Yes, happy Thursday. Sorry with this mask here, I'll talk a little louder. 25 years ago, working with Pinellas County Health Department, one of the things as a supervisor with Healthy Families, one of the things that I observed that we had two services that we were offering for men. One was vasectomies and the other was STDs. And that was one of the things I remember going back and talking with Dr. Damaraj at the time, Ray Hensley, and the rest of our administration staff with Healthy Families, is what about that? When we would go into the hospitals and start to interview moms on their plans, their education, and their goals as moms, that kind of deal, they were fine, absolutely fine, and they were eager and ready to go. But when we started asking about the father of that baby, you could literally see them pulling the sheets up over their faces. And again, as our friends have talked about the importance of their father involved in their lives, I too was raised in a home without a father, a military family, where my mom, for the lack of better words, we used to say, was the man of our house. But as we grew older and we prayed and talked together about growing facial hair. And that's one of the things, once we started to do that, my mom took me inside the bathroom and started to teach me how to shave. Not knowing, I realized that I was bleeding really, really bad, and I was doing this wrong. And I looked through the mirror and I could see her in her eyes, she was crying. Because that was a moment where men and fathers needed to be there for their children. And I had always kind of held tight to that, that example of not only that my mom needed a break, but our father should have been there. And that's one of the things in coming to the table with the collaborative and JWB, we have been absolutely taking the pulse of our communities, and I'm so proud to be a part of this organization. And I look forward to expanding our services as we go into our communities and strengthen the families by working on these dads so they can in turn work with their children. Thank you.
Thank you, Reggie. And I want to kind of echo, we're here today with a specific request, right? But our ultimate goal is that this is natural in our community, and that not just in prevention of child abuse and neglect program, but in all of our programs, we're taking a different lens and being intentional. Do our forums include dads? Can we call dad as well when we're having challenges in the settings? It is a little bit of a culture shift, and this is just a piece of it, but we're excited for this opportunity and to continue the work moving forward. Thank you.
Thank you. Again, seeing no lights, I will call for a motion. Oh,
One real question. One quick
Mr.
question.
McCurrick.
Just on the looking ahead, you talked about where the Father and Family Council and Baycare will begin to pilot a virtual boot camp. How is that going to work?
So historically, Baycare pre-pandemic offered a new dad boot camp that dads could pay to go. Probably not the dads we're reaching. We're signing up for those. You see, Brian did. I made my husband go. And the design of those was that men who had recently had children brought their babies back and worked with the new expectant dads to do things like how to change a diaper and how to feed the baby and those kind of things. And during COVID, those kind of came to a screeching halt. One of our partners in the collaborative, Father and Family Council, was interested kind of separately in doing a boot camp type activity. So we said, okay, we have an expert who has kind of been doing it, let them join forces. So what they're trying to host is the first virtual, so that during the pandemic, we don't have to cease that type of service and support, but then also find ways to enhance it once it is back live, to do these further conversations, right? The reading to your kids conversations, it's important to be involved and visit and engaged and spend quality time. So that is a new area, but we're excited about the potential of those two partners kind of getting together and joining
Yeah,
forces.
I guess part of my question is that from a regional perspective, St. Joe's is in Tampa, where most of the pediatricians and other providers for children care are there, versus here in Pinellas, which we also have all children's and the like. And so I'm just wondering, how is that going to work together and get men from Pinellas County to participate?
Well, so that's where the collaborative comes in. So Father and Family Council is leaning on the collaborative as the backbone to help them do things like the flyers. We're offering the dad bags as an incentive for dads to participate. We're actually paying for the book that Baycare used to charge dads for when they went to the class. And then we'll help recruit from the existing partners. And again, when we can leverage these open community groups, we got to get the dads at the table. And I think when there was a lot of talk early about measurement, not to negate that, but for us, we're so early down this path. Very resource rich community, but in terms of services designed for dads, by dads, we're kind of in our infancy a little bit, but we got to get them at the table. So part of this building is about reach and finding them, and especially those ones that are unlikely to be trying to find us. I don't know if that answers quite your question. And I think it's new. It's gonna, I think especially that partnership will
Yeah, it'll be
evolve.
interesting to see as it rolls out. I
Mhm.
think it's a great opportunity, but I just think it'll be interesting to see as it rolls out. But I will motion to approve.
Okay, motion to approve, Mr. McCurrick.
I'll
and
second.
Judge Moore, second. All in favor? No opposed? Motion carries. And we move on to, thank you very, very much, and thank our partners for being here. And Beth Houghton.
Thank you. Well, you have already heard a lot of what I've been engaged with in the last, since we last met, and the whole organization has. As you look back from November to this meeting, we have tried to be very intentional about looking at the most urgent community needs and not waiting until next budget year before we begin addressing them. So I would tell you that the eviction program or eviction avoidance program that you approved in November has served to fill gaps, but as you all know, when there is federal or other money, that comes first and we step back. So about over 100 families were assisted with that during the time there wasn't anything else. One thing had ceased and the other hadn't picked up again. And so while you approved, I want to say closer to $3 million, thinking we might have to go it alone for families for the rest of this fiscal year, we've spent a bit over $300,000, and you know we are still monitoring the program that is being stood up with the new federal funds to see what the gaps might end up being, and we're staying in really close touch with those who are assisting families who know whether it's working or whether it's not. So, we don't know. We just try to stay in touch with all of that and figure out where we ought to be. And you, by approving that budget, you have given us the flexibility to move quickly should we need to do that to help families not end up on the street. Similarly, you approved a significant amount. I want to say it's $1,475,000 for food, for our food banks and food distribution locations throughout the entire county. And all of those providers are still saying, just in spite of the various supports that are out there, that the numbers of families they are seeing is still far higher than they've ever seen before. So, so that gives what you all voted on, and then we created a contract for, will give, is there as a backup for what we believe will be needed for the rest of the year. We had, I'll just say, significant effort in getting together and ultimately signing a contract that you approved at the last meeting for the participant management services. While we ask those within procurements if they are willing to meet our minimum contractual requirements, and the number one choice said yes, getting to a real contract that was signable, that was a yes, took significant amount of effort and good old, being willing to walk off the car lot if they didn't get it right. So it was significant effort by several of our folks, certainly by Zach in Colleen's office, and Diana Caro here in our office. At one point, we thought we were going to be coming back to you and asking for well over $100,000 in addition, because, I mean, the way, as things got more granular and concrete, it looked that way. As it turns out, Laura, do you remember the dollar amount of the contract? I know I'm putting you on the spot, but it ended up being less than you
Right,
approved.
the savings was about 50-some thousand, or it was a difference of a couple $100,000.
Yes, from,
Yeah.
so anyway, it was some,
Yeah.
it was a good thing. But I just want to really lift up the people we have who do really good work, and are watching out for the JWB's money. And that the terms of the contract would in fact support a good implementation and good support through a 5-year period at time.
Before we go to the next topic, Beth is being a bit humble. She was also very involved in the negotiation. And we'll switch, Mike, you have
Yeah,
Mr. Jarrett,
just
you have a question?
one quick question, because it's something we discussed. And that was, how does the team feel now that they've gone through all this with this group? And yeah, okay, I'm really happy that it's come to a good conclusion. But how does the team now feel about working with the organization going forward?
No, that's a great question. I think what we have a strong sense of is that, in the words of Colleen's partner, who has worked with Social Solutions before, they bring their A game. And that's in all regards. I mean, that's good, but it's also that they're not going to be, let's just say, sloppy about giving us any more than what's in the contract. And if we need more, we know, and we really now know in advance what it is we're going to have to pay for. So that, they were tough, I would say that, but they were also highly motivated to get a contract by a particular date, which I am quite sure had to do with somebody's bonus. And we used that, well, there was today and today only kind of discount that somebody had to make, well, probably the president, who happens to be a she. We had 2 conversations. They were both exceedingly brief, but very direct. So I do think, our, as a whole team, from procurement and outside counsel and in some cases me, we as a team made it work, and I'm really proud we got there. So they are Johnny on the spot. I think they're already scheduling meetings and all the first things that need to happen in that kind of a project. Our Leadership Equity Council has been formed and met. This is a really a cross-section of individuals who work for JWB. And what was, initially really delightful about that is we asked for volunteers, and the group of people who volunteered really represented different departments, people of different races and ethnicities, people at different levels within the organization. So I don't think we could have constructed it any better, but the nice thing is all the folks were really volunteering to be part of making JWB first really internally as culturally competent and equitable as we can make it. So they're really sort of in the formation stage, but they're moving towards then more concrete work. But I'm really pleased to see how they're progressing. I attend every meeting. They know this is important to me, and Judith is their executive team connection. So it's not a group of employees over here who throw recommendations over the transom. We're there with them. We are beginning our budget activities for fiscal year 22. So more on that later, but that always has to start a little bit early. Likewise, we are in the process, or we will soon put out a survey to our employees about issues regarding returning to the workplace versus working virtually or some hybrid. And we'll be having, after that, we expect to have some focus groups so we can hear from our employees first what their preferences are, what their fears are, all of that. And then we as the executive team really will end up needing to make decisions regarding how we do what we do. Over the last year and a half, we have added some employees. And so at this moment in time, as currently configured, we don't have a chair and a desk for everybody. So we are looking at things like hoteling possibly for some number of employees or some, working primarily from home, but having a place to sit down and plug in their laptop when they come in. So, more to come, but I just wanted you to know we are thinking about it and we are working on it. So I'll stop with that.
I'm going to bring a topic up, not to pull from the information items. I'm suggesting on behalf of the board that possibly at our May meeting, we might want to pull the legislative report, being that the session will be over and it will be a more comprehensive report to have Deb make that presentation. I look to you, Laura Brock. Is there any request for public comment?
Yes, we do. We have a request for items 5C from Melinda Perry with Hope Villages of America.
Okay.
Is she here?
Is she here in person or?
She's coming.
And Laura, will you be responsible for the time clock?
Sure.
Welcome.
Thank you. Sorry about that. Wasn't expecting it to come up. I'm Melinda Perry, Chief Operating Officer with Hope Villages of America, formerly RCS Pinellas. Thank you for this opportunity. I just wanted to share briefly about an update of what's happening within our organization. With Grace House, our family homeless shelter, we're still providing shelter for homeless families. And for the past 6 months of this fiscal year, the satisfaction rate from guests of the overall services they've received is 93% either satisfied or very satisfied. So we're very happy about that. And those surveys were provided to JWB staff for review through February. Sorry, I ran up here. Our food distribution center is still providing food in the drive-through manner. We are currently partnering with St. Pete Free Clinic with the funds that were provided through you all. So we appreciate that, to be able to provide food to the community. We had a a perfect USDA audit for that program. Also very proud of that. With our Haven program, the Certified Domestic Violence Center, we had our audit through the Department of Children and Families. That actually went really well. They do a very thorough audit. They review everything from staff files, volunteer files, financials, facility, everything in between, and came out with just 2 issues, one of which was related to the pandemic. So we're very proud of that as well. Organizationally, we received our fiscal year 20 audit that came back with 0 findings, zero material weaknesses, and before depreciation ended the year in the black. So despite dealing with the pandemic and all the challenges that came with that, we have made some great improvements throughout the organization. So we're very happy about that. I would also like to invite anyone who hasn't come to our programs to have a tour. Love to have you out just to show you what it is that we do. It's much more impactful than someone just telling you about it. So we'd love to have you out anytime. So thank you for your support.
Thank you.
This is a long, lengthy list today. So we would like to, Deborah Pruitt, 20 years. Wherever she's at, yeah. Yeah. And we have one other one, is Cheryl Miller, 6 years. And that's all I have today, Madam Chair.
Seeing no lights, seeing no comments, we'll adjourn today's meeting and we'll see you next month.
Okay.